High in the mountains of central Turkey sits the 2,000 square mile region called Cappadocia. And beneath this alien terrain lies a network of 200 underground cities that once housed up to 60,000 people each.
The 3-foot-thick stone plug was fused to the bedrock. After weeks of careful drilling, the team in Turkey finally broke the seal. The air that hissed out was 12,000 years old. They lowered the cameras, and that's when the feed went dark and the site was locked down. But what did they pull from that sealed cave? The first images are being leaked, and they are baffling everyone.
They were hand-carved into volcanic rock. But by who? Archaeologists have theories, but no one knows for sure.
This isn't a tomb or a storage room. It's something else, and it's forcing experts to question everything they thought they knew about human history. The silence of the mountain. A joint Turkish and international team got the permits to go into a sealed cave in Turkey. They weren't expecting much, maybe a natural cavern or a forgotten Byzantine monastery. They drilled a small borehole and sent down a camera. What they saw on the monitor made them stop. The walls weren't rough-hewn stone. They were smooth, unnaturally smooth, as if polished or machined. This is where it gets crazy. There was no easy entrance, no hidden passage. The team had to spend weeks carefully drilling a man-sized entryway, trying not to disturb whatever was inside. The final barrier wasn't a door. It was a plug. A massive 10-foot-thick disc of a strange, dark stone that seemed to be fused into the surrounding rock. It looked less like it was built, and more like it was melted into place. When they finally cut through, the air that escaped hissed. Lab tests on that first puff of air were baffling. It was sterile. 0 microbes. 0 modern contaminants. The carbon dating on the gases inside? 12,500 years old. Let's put that in perspective. The Great Pyramid of Giza is about 4,500 years old. The first cities in Sumeria are about 6,000 years old. Even Göbekli Tepe, the site that already broke history with its 12,000-year-old temples, was just a start. This new site was sealed at the same time Göbekli Tepe was being built, or maybe even before. The team made the first entry. The chamber was vast, just as the GPR had shown. The air was cold and perfectly still. The walls, now visible in their lights, were covered in strange, precise geometric patterns. But it wasn't the room that made them stop. It wasn't the size or the age. It was what was sitting in the exact center of the room. It was something that has no place in the 12th millennium BC. It was something that has no place anywhere. The team's official report is classified. The site is now guarded. But the leaks, the whispers, the grainy photos, they tell a story that has left the world's historians utterly and completely silent. But it wasn't the room that silenced them. It was what was waiting inside. The object in the dark. The object in the center of the vast chamber was a perfect sphere. It was about 10 feet in diameter, floating somehow just inches above a black pedestal. Its surface was a metal that no one on the team recognized. It wasn't gold, it wasn't bronze, it wasn't iron. It was a dull, flat black, and it seemed to absorb the light from their headlamps. One of the geologists got close, not to touch it, but to use a scanner. The reading was impossible. The metal's density was almost double that of osmium, which is the densest natural element on Earth. And get this, the sphere was humming. Not a loud noise, but a low-level vibration the team could feel in their chests. It was emitting a faint electromagnetic field. This wasn't a relic. This was a machine. A 12,500-year-old machine that was, in some way, still on. What most people don't realize is that an object like this does more than just challenge history. It obliterates it. We are taught that people 12,000 years ago were new to farming. They were building simple stone circles. They were not smelting unknown super-dense alloys and building humming electromagnetic spheres. But here's the catch. The sphere wasn't even the most shocking part. Lining the walls were shelves. Not wooden shelves, but shelves carved from the same smooth stone as the walls. And on these shelves were scrolls, hundreds of them. But, like the sphere, they weren't made of anything familiar. They weren't papyrus or animal hide. They were thin, flexible metallic sheets rolled into perfect cylinders. A few were unrolled by robotic arms brought into the chamber. The surface of these scrolls was covered in writing, but it wasn't cuneiform. It wasn't hieroglyphs. It wasn't any known human language. It was a complex system of tiny, etched symbols, arranged in a way that looked almost like a circuit board. The precision was microscopic. It looked like it had been etched with a laser. The team photographed one of the walls. It was a star chart, but the constellations were wrong. An astronomer on the team ran the image through a computer model. The crazy part? The chart was accurate. It was a perfect map of the night sky, as seen from Earth over 150,000 years ago. So, here's the deal. This is why historians are silent. What do you say? How do you go on television and say, everything we told you about our past is wrong? How do you explain a working machine and laser-etched texts from an era when humans were supposedly using rocks to hunt mammoths? The sphere was impossible. The scrolls were unthinkable. But what they found in the next room, that's the part that is being covered up. The artifacts were one thing. But who, or what, built them? The tomb that wasn't a tomb. Behind the main chamber with the sphere, there was a smaller sealed passageway. This one was different. It wasn't fused shut. It was a perfect, airtight stone door that opened with a hiss of decompressing air. The team's remote drone went in first. The room was circular, and the walls glowed with a faint blue-white light. It was coming from the stone itself. And sitting in a circle, facing the center, were 7 chairs. This wasn't a tomb. It was a cockpit, or a meeting room. And in the chairs were the occupants. They weren't skeletons. They weren't mummies. They were perfectly, impossibly preserved, as if they had sat down for a meeting yesterday. They were wearing simple one-piece suits of a material that looked like woven glass. But it was who they were that has everyone terrified. They were not human. The leaked reports are frantic. The figures are tall. Very tall. Even sitting, the team estimated they were between 7 and 8 feet in height. Their heads were elongated, but not in a way that suggested cultural binding. The shape was just different. Their skin was a pale, almost translucent white. They had 4 long fingers on each hand. Their faces were calm, eyes closed as if they were just sleeping. This is the part that breaks everything. It's one thing to find an old pot. It's another to find Göbekli Tepe. It is something entirely different to find beings that do not match anything in the human evolutionary record. For the DNA analysis, a preliminary on-site sample was taken. The results were so shocking, the lab tech thought the machine was broken. The DNA structure, it didn't match ours. It was a completely different complex system that did not share a common ancestor with any life on Earth. So, who were they? Where did they come from? Were these the giants mentioned in so many ancient texts? The Nephilim? The Anunnaki? Were these the gods who came from the sky and taught humanity how to build? This is why historians are silent, because this discovery just ripped the topic out of their hands and gave it to, well, who? The biologists are baffled, the physicists are intrigued, and the military has locked the site down. The academics are silent because they are out of their league. This isn't a history problem anymore. But one question terrified the researchers more than anything else. Why was this place sealed? What was so awful that these beings, with all their technology, had to hide themselves inside a mountain? The answer, it turns out, was written on the walls. The chamber wasn't a tomb. It was a warning. What the scrolls said. The team's AI, the same kind of system used to decipher lost languages, was put to the test. The control room was silent, and the only sound was a low electronic hum as the system worked. It had been scanning the metallic scrolls and the cryptic wall etchings for 3 solid days. Finally, the system clicked. It got to work. The AI began to cross-reference the strange, circuit-like language with the complex star charts etched into the walls. It was looking for patterns, for anything that resembled a key. After running billions of calculations, it found one. The system had a breakthrough. The language wasn't just a language. It was a mix of phonetic writing and advanced mathematics. It was a blueprint and a story, all woven into one. And it was telling a story. It was a warning. What the team has pieced together so far is chilling. The occupants were not from here. The scrolls describe a homeworld, a planet orbiting a distant dying star. They describe a long, multi-generational journey across the blackness of space, a desperate search for a new home. They found Earth. The scrolls say they had been here for a long time, arriving long before humans were, well, humans. They settled, living in small outposts, and coexisting with the early, primitive hominids who were on the planet. They saw themselves as caretakers. The scrolls are very clear. They never interfered. They just watched. They were scientists and observers. They studied the planet, the animals, the plants, and the planet's long, slow cycles. And in their careful studying, they saw a disaster coming, a cosmic one. The scrolls describe in terrifying detail a sky fire. They didn't call it a comet. They called it a great messenger from the cold. Their advanced star charts showed its path. It wasn't just going to pass by. It was on a collision course. The math was certain. It was going to hit. All the data points to the Younger Dryas period, around 12,800 years ago. This is a real event that scientists know happened. A period of extreme, sudden climate change that saw temperatures plummet. The leading theory is a comet, or fragments of a comet, striking the Earth. These beings weren't guessing. They knew. They had the math. And they knew it was an extinction-level event. These beings knew it was coming. They couldn't stop it. The sky fire was going to wipe the slate clean. They didn't have time to leave the planet. Their original ship was long gone, cannibalized for parts to build their settlements. So, they built this ark. The cave wasn't a cave. It was a bunker, a time capsule. The fused door on the outside? That was the clue that broke the case. It wasn't melted from the inside to seal it. It was melted from the outside by the cataclysm itself. The heat from the impact's atmospheric entry was so intense, it literally vitrified the entrance. It flash-cooked the rock, sealing them in forever. The sphere in the main room, it was a power source. The team's scans showed it was still emitting a tiny, almost undetectable energy signal. It was a masterpiece of technology, still humming after 12,000 years. The scrolls? They were a library. The entire history, science, and culture of a non-human race, preserved on indestructible metal sheets, waiting to be found. And the occupants? Well, that's the most tragic part. The room was a suspended animation chamber. It was meant to keep them alive, sleeping, until the Earth was habitable again. The systems were designed to wake them up once the atmosphere cleared and the long, cold night was over. But something went wrong. The power from the sphere, while still humming, had failed to keep the life support systems running. The team's analysis showed the failure probably happened about 1,000 years after the impact. They had survived the fire, but they didn't survive the long, cold dark that followed. They hadn't passed away. They had just not woken up. Think about it. Göbekli Tepe, Çatalhöyük, the first Sumerian cities. Göbekli Tepe is a massive, complex stone temple. It was built 11,600 years ago. That's before agriculture. Hunter-gatherers aren't supposed to be able to do that. Historians have always wondered why human civilization suddenly exploded out of nowhere, with advanced agriculture, astronomy, and organization. What if it wasn't a start? What if it was a restart? What if the survivors of the Younger Dryas, the primitive humans these beings had watched over, found other, smaller caches? Maybe not a giant bunker like this one, but smaller libraries, data dumps. What if our first myths of gods giving us knowledge were just literal history? Stories of beings from the sky who taught them how to plant seeds, how to track the stars, and how to build. The silence of historians is the sound of an entire field of study realizing that their first civilization was actually the second. And the gods who started it all were just the lonely survivors of a different, older world trying to pass on a message before the sky fell. History is over. So, what does this all mean? The thing is, this discovery doesn't just add a new chapter to history. It ends the book we were writing and hands us a new one, written in a language we can't read. For people watching this, you might be wondering if this is all true. Did this happen overnight? The answer is no. The whispers have been around for years, decades even. These whispers were the legends we all know, the stories of Atlantis, of Lemuria, of a great global flood that washed the world clean. Mainstream history labeled these as myths, simple stories told by primitive people to explain thunderstorms and earthquakes. The whispers were the researchers who pointed to the impossible mathematics of the Great Pyramid, the 20-ton stones cut with laser-like precision. They were the geologists who looked at the erosion on the Sphinx and said, "This wasn't wind and sand. This was thousands of years of rain." But they were called names. They were shut out of journals, their careers stalled. They were told it was all just coincidence, pareidolia, a fantasy. But the evidence from this new site in Turkey, it's not a whisper, it's a shout. It's a sonic boom that shatters the entire foundation of our past. The evidence is so overwhelming, it can't be ignored. The mystery is over. We are not the first advanced civilization on this planet. The key detail we've all been missing is that we've been looking at sites like Göbekli Tepe as the start of something. Mainstream archaeology tells us that 11,500 years ago, primitive hunter-gatherers, people who hadn't even invented pottery or agriculture, just woke up one day and decided to build the world's first and most complex megalithic temple. A structure with perfect astronomical alignments and T-shaped pillars weighing multiple tons. It makes no sense. Now it seems clear they were the end of something. Or perhaps the first desperate attempt by the survivors, the primitive humans who lived through the Younger Dryas, to rebuild what they had seen the gods create. Think about it. This new discovery changes our entire perspective. Göbekli Tepe isn't the beginning of our story. It's the desperate fading echo of theirs. It's a cargo cult. The survivors, who had been thrown back into the Stone Age by a global cataclysm, saw the gods and their incredible shining cities. They watched it all get wiped from the face of the earth by fire and water. They were trying to build a beacon, a memorial. They were trying to imitate the technology of the gods to bring them back. They were lifting stones they shouldn't have been able to lift, carving animals with a precision they shouldn't have possessed, all working from a fading, traumatized memory of a world that was lost. This is the new reality. And the silence from the academic world? It isn't a conspiracy. It's not a cover-up. It is the sound of thousands of experts simultaneously realizing their life's work is now a footnote. It's the sound of shock. It's the sound of awe. Imagine being a tenured professor who spent 40 years writing the definitive textbook on the Neolithic Revolution. And in one afternoon, this discovery proves the revolution wasn't a revolution at all. It was just a slow, painful recovery. It's the realization that the last 200 years of archaeology were spent studying the wrong people. We weren't studying the masters. We were studying their kindergarten-level copies. Everything that follows is now in question. Our religious texts? What if the gods who came from the sky, the Anunnaki, the Watchers, the figures who gave humanity knowledge and laws, what if they were just the survivors? The technically advanced remnants of the precursor civilization, trying to teach the primitive nomadic humans how to restart. Our myths of creation? They might be the most accurate history we have, a fragmented memory of a global civilization, a serpent of energy, and a tree of life based on a technology we can't comprehend. Our understanding of our own biology? What if the junk DNA in our own cells is a leftover fingerprint? A genetic marker left by a civilization that had mastered its own biology. This one sealed cave in Turkey has completely reset the human timeline. And that's why this time, it is a cover-up. The government and military have the site now. The perimeter is miles wide. They are controlling the flow of information, releasing only grainy, sanitized photos. Why? Because this isn't about history anymore. It's about technology. It's about power. The truth is out. The sphere is real. Reports from the initial excavation team, before the blackout, describe a perfect dark orb made of a material that isn't on the periodic table. It's cold to the touch, and some say it hums. Is it a map? A power source? A data storage device holding the sum of their knowledge? The scrolls are real, not paper, but wafer-thin sheets of a flexible, metallic substance. They are covered in a language that is part mathematics, part musical notation. The occupants are real, 3 of them, perfectly preserved, sitting in chairs around the sphere. They aren't exactly like us. Taller, thinner, with a cranial capacity that would make our own skulls look primitive. And the most terrifying thought? The scrolls describe this event as cyclical. A repeating pattern. They knew it was coming. A solar-induced catastrophe, a galactic alignment that our solar system passes through every 12,000 years, a great winter that resets the planet. They were a civilization as advanced, or more advanced, than we are. And they couldn't stop it. All their knowledge, all their power, was washed away. The ark they built, this sealed cave, was to survive one event. It was a time capsule, a desperate message in a bottle thrown into an ocean of time, hoping, praying, that the next civilization to rise would find it. The warning they left was for us. Think about it. Their world ended 12,800 years ago. We're on the other side of that cycle. We are seeing the same signs they described. A wandering magnetic pole, rapid destabilizing climate shifts, strange behavior from our own sun. This discovery isn't just about the past. The scrolls aren't a history lesson. They're an instruction manual. And we are out of time. The teams are still working to translate the scrolls. What do you think the final warning will be? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more fascinating discoveries like this. Thanks for watching.